And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Of course, we brought you the pretty distressing, sad news that former President Joe Biden was diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer. This comes after quite the week for the former president, with the release of somewhat of a damning tell-all by reporters Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson titled Original Sin. And then on Friday afternoon, the release by the outlet Axios of some of the audio with then President Biden's interview with special counsel Robert Hur in regards to, during the middle of the probe into the president at the time, his handling of classified information. So it's safe to say it was quite the week for former President Joe Biden. Fox's Rebecca Castor with more details.
Former President Biden sharing his first message on X Monday morning since his cancer diagnosis was revealed. Cancer touches us all. Like so many of you, Jill and I have learned that we are strongest in the broken places. Thank you for lifting us up with love and support.
He is a fighter, and he is somebody who is relentlessly optimistic.
Biden's office announced Sunday he was diagnosed just before the weekend with an aggressive form of prostate cancer, which has metastasized to the bone.
I can't tell you for sure, but he didn't just get this overnight. He's had this for months and months. Even if it is aggressive, it's a Gleason 9, which means under the microscope, group 5, under the microscope, it's quite aggressive.
Biden's last official medical exam as president was in February of last year, when his doctor gave him a clean bill of health. Experts say it's uncommon to do the prostate-specific antigen test for men over 70, but the president of the United States is not your average patient.
You can miss prostate cancer, but most of the time regular screening picks it up. A sitting president, I would expect to have advanced screening.
Biden's diagnosis comes as Democrats are facing fierce criticism over how the party handled last year's election, and a new book comes out tomorrow on their alleged attempts to cover up Biden's mental decline.
It's painfully obvious President Biden should not have run.
Biden's office says even though this is an aggressive form of cancer, there are treatments available, and President Biden and his family are reviewing options. In Washington, Rebecca Castor, Fox News.
Rebecca, thanks so much. So let's talk about this week for former President Joe Biden with none other than our friend there at 24 Site, reporter Tom Lobiano. He joins me. Tom, good to see you here. Before we get into some of the other kind of revelations that this book has divulged and shown and the Hur audio tape, the cancer diagnosis, I just have to note so much of President Biden and then Vice President Biden's career throughout the last decade was about the fight for more cancer research, finding a cure for cancer, because it took the life of his son, Beau Biden, back in 2015, that aggressive form of brain cancer. And now he has a fight of his own that he's waging. What do you make of that, the kind of cruel irony to it?
Oh, boy, what a great point, too. You know, boy, I hadn't thought about that until you mentioned that. You know, it was a decade ago. It actually in the midst, or at least the start of the then 2016 Republican Democratic primaries back then, that that Biden, who was at that point vice president with Obama, announced the moonshot to try to find some kind of cure for cancer. And that's a 1 decade. That's a lot has changed in a decade. Now, you know, that's a very tough. It's hard for Biden. It obviously, you know, with you know, regardless of the circumstances, right? I mean, you know, I've heard that the treatment has improved, but certainly at his age, you know, what little we do know, we don't know whether it was discovered when he was president or not. That I have not seen anything confirming that one way or another, but it is not a good diagnosis. Certainly not in any way. There's just so much going on with him right now. I'm trying to think of the last time there was so much news. You know, the last time there was so much news about a former president, that former president was Trump. That's
and that's so true. And I would venture to say the last time there was this much news about Biden was last July when he withdrew from the ticket at the time, kind of ceding the way for Kamala Harris to run against Trump, and we know now how this story ended there. I just want to ask, let's get to the book titled Original Sin by Alex Thompson at Axios and Jake Tapper at CNN. Tom, I have to ask you this. Are there any kind of anecdotes? I'm sure you've pored over some of them that have already been reported, vignettes or pieces there, that you would characterize as damning, that would make people second guess President Biden's fitness while in office? Do you think there are some that you've seen so far?
Boy, I'll tell you, Tapper, Thompson, both excellent reporters, add to the canon of great Biden and 2024 books that we've seen so far. Really good chiefs of staff. The latest chiefs of staff installment from Chris Whipple, and of course our friends Jonathan Allen and Amy Parnes out with their readout of what happened with Biden a few weeks ago. Fight and the picture that emerges, and there's this struggle when you're a reporter of trying to get as much as you possibly can out there in public so that people can make decisions. That is the essence of being a reporter. The Biden team and that very close-knit circle did an amazing job of hiding, or apparently hiding, as much of this as they could. And, who's ultimately responsible for this? Is it Donilon? Is it Ricchetti? Does it fall to the family? The reporting is consistent. I saw Ashley Biden had, launched an attack against Tapper and Thompson. Frankly, it kind of reminded me of when Pence's middle child, Charlotte, launched an attack on me when I published the Pence biography. I take their reporting to be incredibly strong. I don't. But they all paint the same picture of somebody who is being shielded by this staff that just refused to either acknowledge reality in public, did not want to acknowledge it. I was listening to an interview earlier today with Thompson and Tapper, where they talked about how, Anthony Blinken, former Secretary of State, he was then the Secretary of State, sort of kind of tried a little bit to confront Biden on running again, but not very forcefully. And, who's at fault for that? At the end of the day, I don't know. I mean, in all politics, so much of this comes down to the principle, and that's Biden. And, to a degree, Jill Biden, former First Lady. But a lot of focus on that very tight inner circle right now.
I just want to kind of touch on that, the C word, cover up. It's in the subtitle of the book, Original Sin here. And books like this are meant for posterity, for the record, 50, 100 years from now. What will Joe Biden's legacy be? Will he be seen in this type of state in the last, year, 2 years of his presidency, a one-term president? And history will be the judge. But books like this help the historians, help the public judge for themselves, to your point, how Joe Biden will be received by history here. Was it a cover-up? Is that too strong a term?
I don't know.
But Tom, you mentioned who does it fall on? Doesn't it fall on Joe Biden? Isn't he the principal at the end of the day?
Yeah, it is. This reminds me a lot of 2016 Clinton and frankly the 24 election, because you have this where there's such a large audience for this, because on the one hand, you have Republicans and Trump MAGA world that is absolutely fixated on Biden. And there, continue to be the lies about the 2020 election, a heavy focus, whether or not it's right to focus on that, on Hunter Biden and his dealings. And on the left, you have and centrists in the Democratic Party. There's a blame game, all right? But I think I was at an event on Capitol Hill earlier today talking with a few sources, and we were discussing this because, there's so much happening right now. There's some speculation that, will the Biden coverage will this Biden bubble be enough to distract from, the mega bill that's happening right now? Any number of disasters that we're seeing, as we saw just a few minutes ago. Um, Anything that Trump is doing right now. I mean, there's so much the Supreme Court is issuing, short orders coming out here, short opinions, blocking actions. I mean, the court action is nonstop. I mean, I write about this routinely over at 24 Site News. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that said, it's big. We still have to talk about this.
Sure. Yeah. Tom, you're kind of alluding to the kind of why now of all of this. And I would make the argument that, it seemed to be inevitable. We knew books were going to be published.
Yes.
Any post-presidency has that. I want to put up this post from Naomi Biden, former President Biden's granddaughter. She said, just read a copy of this silly book. And if anyone is curious for a review from someone who lived it firsthand, this book is political fairy smut for the permanent professional chattering class. She says the ones who rarely enter the arena but profit from the spectacle of those that do. Put simply, it amounts to a bunch of unoriginal, uninspired lies written by irresponsible, self-promoting journalists out to make a quick buck. It relies on unnamed, anonymous sources pushing a self-serving false narrative that absolves them of any responsibility for our current national nightmare. All of this at the expense of a man so completely good and honest that it is impossible for these people to ever understand the why or how of it all. There are real stories to be told, and one day they will be. I suspect history will reward the truth. Naomi Biden, Joe Biden's granddaughter there, with quite the scathing statement about the book itself. But Tom, it does seem like Biden's only defenders right now are members of his family, because that was the question. And that's why Thompson and Tapper are getting a lot of criticism. Is this was plain as day to everyone who watched Joe Biden for the last 2 years, especially those who covered the Biden presidency. And now they're trying to rewrite history. Is that a valid argument? I guess Naomi Biden have a point that this is a false narrative, or no?
Well, Mike Ricci, who used to be the communications director for Larry Hogan, he used to be the spokesperson for Paul Ryan. He teaches a crisis communications course over at Georgetown now. And he has a very good Substack, which after you're done subscribing to 24 Site News, do head on over and look up for Mike Ricci, same spelling as Christina Ricci, R-I-C-C-I. And he actually, wrote about the Biden spokespeople, and now we have family members hitting back on a multitude of things, talking about what you don't do in crisis communications. And I think back to what Naomi Biden wrote here. It's not a detailed rebuttal at all. It's broad, it's vague, and this gets to another part of crisis comms, which is sometimes you want to get out there first to tell the story. I mean, look, Trump is a master of that. Whether it's accurate or not is a different question. It's certainly not in most cases. But in terms of the raw stagecraft of it and shaping narrative and the raw politics of it, this is why you go out there and you talk about these things. I mean, Biden throughout his presidency was hampered by not being accessible. And it's possible this is why he was not accessible, And, as we talked about, too, towards the end of last year, same thing with Harris. They weren't putting her out there as much. I don't know if that would have changed things all too much, but it doesn't help.
Yeah, I want to get to the Her audio now that was released by Axios on Friday night. And we're going to play, it's a 4-minute clip, and I know you're sticking around with us here while we play it. Before we get into it, the DOJ, the Biden DOJ, fought very hard against the release of this audio, saying that, it was executive privilege. You've already seen the written transcript. Everyone read it at the time. And you're talking about access, and you're talking about getting ahead of the story. You remember, because I think you were on with me, that hastily arranged press conference after the release of the Her report. And Biden was extremely angry, and he was extremely on the defensive. And many groups went to court to get this audio released, Axios releasing it on Friday. Let's listen to some of it here.
So during this time when you were living in Chambers Road and there were documents related to the Penn Biden Center or the Biden or the cancer booster shot or your book, where did you keep papers that related to those things that you were actively working on?
Well, I don't know. This is what, 2017, 18, that area?
Yes, sir.
Remember, in this time frame, my son is either been deployed or is dying. And so it was, and by the way, there were still a lot of people at the time when I got out of the Senate that were encouraging me to run in this period, except the president. That's not a mean thing to say. I mean, he just thought that she had a better shot of winning the presidency than I did. And so I hadn't at this point, even though I'm at Penn, I hadn't walked away from the idea that I may run for office again. If I ran again, I'd be running for president. And so what was happening though, what month did Bo die? May 30th, 2018. Was it 2015 he died?
Maybe 2015.
I think it's 2015.
I'm not sure the months are, but I think that was.
Yeah.
That's right, Mr. President.
And what's happened in the meantime is that and Trump gets elected in November of 2017? 2016. All right. So, why do I have 2017 here?
That's when you left office, January of 2017.
Okay. But that's when Trump gets sworn in.
Right.
January.
Right. Correct.
Okay. Yeah. And in 2017, Bo had passed, and this is personal. The genesis of the book and the title, Promise Me Dad, was I know you're all close with your sons and daughters, but Bo was like my right arm, and that was my left. These guys were a year and a day apart, and they could finish each other's sentences. And Bo, I used to go home on the train in the period that I was still in the Senate. Anyway, do you remember? There was not pressure. Bo knew how much I adored him. And maybe it sounds so, everybody knew how close we were. There was not anybody in the world who wondered whether or not. Anyway. And so.
Sir, I'm wondering if this is a good time to take a break briefly. Then.
No, let me just keep going to get it done.
Okay, bringing back Tom Lobiano in. Tom, you just watched it all there. What does it show, do you think?
Well, it's fun. I mean, listening to the 4 minutes of that, I can't shake how different that was a year ago versus what we have now. I don't think, with the Justice Department being put under the wing of the president in the Oval Office now, I don't think you would have a special counsel again. It's really remarkable. I remember the prosecution of Hunter Biden on the gun charges as well. It's just a different world. It's really astounding to me. Look, that frankly, that sounded like the candidate who showed up on the debate stage for the first debate and only debate between him and Trump back in June of last year. If that had come out earlier, would it have changed things? Maybe. I don't think, I don't know though.
So,
But also, it does feel like comparing apples and oranges though, because things are so different right now.
right. There was, though, at least from what we can hear and see in this clip, there was great lengths from Biden defenders to, essentially
Yeah.
tarnish the reputation of a U.S.
Yeah.
attorney in one Robert Hur. And I was just struck by the fact that, he gave Biden the time to answer. He followed up with Biden. You
Yeah.
can just see it in just that clip. That was just 4 minutes. It was a very lengthy interview. Mind you, this was literally after October 7th, or in the middle of October 7th and October 8th of 2023. Literally
Yes.
the day after Hamas attacked Israel via the Gaza Strip here. But Tom, Joe Biden, in a couple interviews since he has left the presidency, has maintained that he could have won, that he could have beat Donald Trump. Why does he keep saying that?
There's a thing in that there's that old joke about every senator wakes up in the morning and looks in the mirror and sees a future president. I think, I've been covering politics for more than 2 decades now. It reminds me of when the former Indiana governor and later became Purdue University president, Mitch Daniels, he was asked about not running against Barack Obama in 2012, not running in that primary, not running again. And he had the same answer. He's like, well, I would have won. Okay. A lot of politicians are like that. I couldn't. Maybe this is why I cover them and I don't run for, I don't do this myself. I
So-
don't entirely understand that mentality, but just a lot of them have that for some reason.
I think a lot of people would call it ego. But Tom, I want to ask you just finally and briefly here, we got to go. I want to talk about the state of the Democratic Party. Where does it go from here? Biden's 2020 primary campaign manager for president, his name, Greg Schultz, wrote in a post today, quote, this: the Democrats face a painful truth. Their infrastructure is not primarily built to win elections. He said instead it serves entrenched interests that pull the party away from broad-based strategies and toward ideological extremes and overarching focus on identity. So you have that from someone who ran Biden's campaign back in 2020. Who is the leader of the Democratic Party right now?
Oh boy, great question. Well, I think this means I need to write up a list of ranking the 2028 contenders
I
for
think
the
you do.
Democrats. I think it's time. I see Pritzker out there. A lot of Whitmer. I see Pete Buttigieg. You see Pete Buttigieg in Iowa. I mean, tell me that's not a throwback to 2020. Look, it's there isn't one right now, and I think that's the issue. Frankly, in a lot of ways, I've had this discussion with a lot of sources over the last few months. It's very much the reckoning that the Democrats are having right now that the Republicans had 8 years ago, or really even 16 years ago, give or take, starting with the Republican Tea Party. So I don't know. God, it's what a great question.
So I guess I said briefly because we got to go, but I got to bring up former Vice President Harris. If she does decide to pursue higher office, these questions will follow her about what she knew, what she saw about Biden's supposed decline, his health at the time. They're not going away. I mean, they were very present in her abbreviated campaign, 107 days there last fall, last summer. They're going to follow her, aren't they? Does she need a coherent answer on this, and soon?
This is the answer when I talk with my neighbors, civilians, right? People who don't work in this arena, and they ask me this question, who's it going to be? The answer I give is I don't think we know yet. I don't think we've seen that person yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Tom, we got to leave it at that. I know we went a little long. It was always fun to talk politics with you. It was good to see you. It's been a while, and we'll chat soon. Thanks so much, Tom.